When we last left Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus and Jesus and all of the others in the legend of Joseph of Arimathea, Caiaphas, Annas, Gamaliel, and the Sanhedrin had determined that Jesus must die. Joseph, wanting to warn Jesus, traveled to Bethany. On the road, he was knocked over by Gestas and Demas, the two thieves who were fleeing the Romans, having murdered one of their Praetorian guards. The Romans captured Gestas and Demas. Joseph then proceeds to meet with Jesus at the house of Lazarus and Mary and Martha. He warns Jesus of the Sanhedrin's plot to destroy him. Jesus, however, in turn, tells Joseph that there is a bigger plan in play here, one which will redeem the whole world. Jesus then sends his disciples to set up a place in the city of Jerusalem where he and his disciples can continue to celebrate the Passover Seder meal. We join Jesus in scene 5 in the upper room on March 28th in the evening. Jesus, Philip, Peter, John, Judas, and the other disciples are sitting at one table. Joseph, Jesus' mother, Mary, Mary Magdalene, Mary the wife of Cleopas, Cleopas himself, and Lazarus are sitting at a second table. Mary and Martha are again serving and clearing away dishes. Cleopas raises his glass for a toast. Here's to finding such a beautiful upper room for tonight's meal, with Jerusalem as full as it is this year, and it being so late in the Passover celebration. Good job, Peter, John, and Philip. Echoes of hear, hear, and yes, good job resound around the dinner table as the entire company toasts to Peter, John, and Philip. Philip says, "It really wasn't that hard, but we will take your gratitude anyway. Really, all we did was follow Jesus' instructions. We found Samuel near the water gate carrying a jar of water, and we simply followed him back to his place. He was all too glad to have our master stay here in his house tonight." As the disciples and Jesus continue to talk silently at their table, Joseph turns to his niece, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and relays his concerns to her about Jesus. "I really wish Jesus had stayed away from Jerusalem tonight. I have a bad feeling that trouble is brewing, and it's coming our way." Mary replies, "You should know well, as I do, that trouble brews around Jesus. Ever since he was a boy, and he and John used to play together here, those boys were always getting in trouble. Oh, and yet, strangely enough, they were always finding ways to get out of trouble too." "This is different," says Joseph. "Mary, this is much worse." Mary grows serious. "You may be right, Uncle. When Jesus was only an infant, we brought him here to Jerusalem to consecrate him. When we arrived at the temple, an old man came up to us and blessed us, saying, "This child is destined to cause the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that was spoken against, so that the thoughts and the hearts of many will be revealed." He then spoke directly to me, saying, "Behold, mother, a sword will pierce your own heart, your own soul too." I feel like that sword is about to strike. Mary Magdalene adds, "Don't grieve tonight, mother. Not in this time. It's not the time to cry over what hasn't happened yet. Let tomorrow worry about itself. Those were your son's own words. Tonight, we are to remember and celebrate." Mary, Jesus' mother, wipes a tear from her eye. "Yes, Mary, of course you are right. Thank you." Mary Magdalene continues, "Do you know what Jesus said to me when I first saw him? I had 7 demons living within me, and no one wanted to have anything to do with me. Jesus showed up and said, 'Be at peace. Repent and follow me, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand.' I tell you, when those demons heard Jesus speak, they bolted right out of me and into the night, faster than you can say, 'Jehovah provides.' Right then and there, I knew what I had to do. And here I am, 3 years later, clean as a whistle." Mary, the wife of Clopas, speaks up. "You know what I remember best about these past 3 years? I remember Jesus' stories about the kingdom of heaven. My favorites were the ones about the treasure in the field and the pearl of great worth, which the farmhand and the merchant found and then purchased with everything they owned. You know, we are that treasure and that pearl, and Jesus is the farmhand and the merchant who is giving up everything to have us here with him tonight." Lazarus adds, "Well, I will never forget coming back from the dead. I mean, who could forget such an experience? One moment, total nothingness. And the next, Jesus' baritone voice shouting, 'Lazarus, come forth!' I opened my eyes, took one whiff of myself, and I knew I had to get out of that tomb." Mary Magdalene pushes Lazarus. "Lazarus, please. We're trying to eat here. Yuck!" The upper room suddenly grows quiet as Jesus stands and lifts his arms to all who are gathered there with him. Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, join him at the table. Jesus holds up his cup of wine. "My dear friends, all I have learned from my Father, I have shared with you. I have chosen each of you to go forth and to bear much fruit. Fruit that will last the tests of time. But alas, As for this fruit, I tell you the truth, I will not drink of this wine again until I drink of it in the day when it is new with you in my Father's kingdom." Bending down, Jesus places his cup on the table. He picks up a tray of matzah, unleavened bread. Raising it, Jesus blesses the bread. "We acknowledge you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, for you bring forth bread from the earth. For who other than you, Father, has the power to create the spark of life that makes the wheat grow and thus provide for us the food?" Lowering the tray, Jesus breaks the stack of bread and passes the tray to John. He continues, "Take and eat this bread, for this is my body broken for you. When you eat of this, remember me." As the disciples begin to pass the tray of bread around, Jesus again picks up his cup and he raises it up, blessing the cup. "We acknowledge you, O Lord our God. You are the ruler of the universe. You bring forth fruit from the vine. For who other than you, Father, has the power to sanctify the spark of life that makes the fruit grow and thus provide for us our drink?" Jesus passes the chalice on to John. "Take and drink from this cup," he says, "all of you. For this is my blood, which I am willingly pouring out for you. This cup represents my new covenant with you, which is the forgiveness of your sins. When you drink of this, remember me." Sitting back down at the table, Jesus waits patiently for everyone in the room to eat of the tray of bread and drink from the cup. When the tray and the cup return to him, he sadly speaks to his disciples. "Sadly I say, and I tell you the truth, one of you sitting here will betray me." Gasps of, "What? Surely not! Who would do such a thing? Surely not I!" resounds around the room. Jesus holds up his hand. "Behold, the one who dips his bread into the bowl of wine with me is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written of him. But woe to the man who betrays me. It would have been better if he had never been born." As soon as Jesus finished speaking, he picks up a piece of bread and he dips it in the bowl next to him. Judas, at the same time, dips his piece of bread in the same bowl. Looking up at Jesus in surprise, he then turns to the rest of the disciples and he sees them staring at him. He quickly gets up and leaves the room. Several of the disciples stand in confusion. Joseph of Arimathea leans against his niece, Jesus' mother. "Excuse me, niece. I do not trust that fellow. He is the son of Caiaphas' brother. And with all of that is going on right now in the Sanhedrin, I think I will follow him and see what Judas intends for Jesus. Excusing himself from the table, Joseph quickly gathers up his traveling cloak, his walking staff, and he leaves the upper room to follow Judas. Jesus, however, motions for his disciples to sit again. He continues to speak to them. My friends, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. For in my Father's house there are many mansions, and I am going there to prepare a place for you. I will come back and take you to be with me, and you will know where I am. You know the way, for I am the way. I am the truth. I am also the life. And I will take you with me to see my Father. Philip, confused, asks, Lord, can't you just show us the Father? Right here, right now? That will be enough for us. Jesus says, Philip, have you not realized that anyone who sees me has seen the Father? My Father and I are one. Now let us go forth and rejoice, for the hour is late and I feel the need to pray. As Jesus stands and gathers his disciples to him, his mother approaches him. His mother, brushing Jesus' arm affectionately, says, My son, do what you must. The women, Lazarus, Clopas, and I will remain here and clean up the room for Samuel. Jesus pauses and leans in and kisses his mother on the forehead. Turning to his disciples, he says, Come, let us go forth and let us sing as we walk. Jesus and the disciples leave, and they are singing a hymn of praise. His mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Mary the wife of Cleopas, Lazarus, Cleopas himself, and Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, all begin to clear away the remaining dishes. Joseph then enters, looking frustrated. He looks around outside of the upper room and then moves inside, throwing up his arms in disgust. Nicodemus suddenly enters, knocks on the door, and approaches Joseph. Joseph, what's wrong? Joseph shakes his head. I was following someone, but then I lost sight of him. Then I came back to find Jesus, and now Jesus is gone. Nicodemus shrugs. Well, whatever you are doing, forget it. The Sanhedrin is gathering their soldiers right now to arrest Jesus. Caiaphas is going to charge him with blasphemy and the intent to incite a riot against Rome. You need to come with me right now. We have to try and influence the council in any way possible before things get even more out of hand and it's too late for any of us. Nicodemus and Joseph quickly exit the scene. In scene 6, we find Jesus and his disciples heading to the Garden of Gethsemane. A grove of trees is located within this garden, while a smaller grove is located right in the middle. Behind, in the city, you can see the temple hall set up. Gamaliel is checking out one of the offering boxes located near the temple. Joseph and Nicodemus approach. Joseph is still carrying his walking stick. They both turn around in confusion, looking for Caiaphas and for the Pharisees at the temple. Nicodemus asks, "Gamaliel, where is the Sanhedrin meeting?" Gamaliel looks at him. "The Sanhedrin meeting? Why, we have already met. Caiaphas, Annas, sent our soldiers to arrest Jesus an hour ago." Don't look so shocked, Nicodemus. After all, there was nothing that you or even Joseph could have done to prevent it. Joseph asks, "Where is Caiaphas now? I demand an immediate audience with him." Gamaliel laughs. "Be my guest, Senator. He has returned home. If you so desire, I will convey your wishes to Caiaphas when I see him in the morning." Joseph turns to Nicodemus. "Tomorrow will be too late." Nicodemus asks, "What will you do?" Joseph says, "I'll ride out to Gethsemane and try to intercept the soldiers. You return to Samuel's house and inform Jesus' mother Mary and the rest. They need to know what is going on." Nicodemus nods and clasps Joseph's hand. Then they both exit, with Gamaliel yelling after them, "You'll never reach Gethsemane in time." Gathering up the temple offerings, Gamaliel shakes his head and leaves. In the garden, Jesus, Philip, Peter, and John, and the other disciples are standing near the grove of trees. After looking around, Jesus motions to the grove in the center. "Sit here while I go over there and pray. Peter, John, please join me while I pray." Philip and the other disciples settle in under the first grove of trees. But being filled with too much Passover wine, they soon find themselves falling asleep. Jesus, Peter, and John move to the center grove. Philip yawns, rubbing his head. "Oh, man, I think I had too much wine for dinner. I can't keep my eyes open." Jesus leans against Peter. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Peter and John station themselves near the smaller grove of trees. Jesus moves further into the center of the grove, where he kneels to pray. Peter and John both yawn and stretch as they settle down and also fall asleep. Jesus cries out loudly, "My Father, if it is possible, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, your will be done, and not mine." Standing, Jesus returns to Peter and John and finds them asleep. Glancing over his shoulder at his other disciples, also asleep, Jesus smacks Peter upside the head. Peter jumps up, startled awake. "My Lord, I'm sorry. The wine must have gone to my head." Jesus can't help but smile. "Continue to watch and pray, Peter, or you too will fall into temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, Jesus moves back to the center of the grove. He kneels to pray. Peter slumps back down next to John, and the two go back to sleep. Jesus says, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup of wrath, take this suffering from me, but not my will, but yours be done." Standing again, Jesus returns to Peter and John and finds them still asleep. Shaking his head, he once again moves back to the center of the grove and kneels and for a third time prays, "Abba, Father, everything is possible with you. Please take this cup of judgment from me. And if you still will, I will drink all of your poison. For them, for all of them." Once again, Jesus stands and returns to Peter and John. Nudging Peter, he says, "You've rested enough, my friend. Get up. My hour is near. The Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. See, my betrayer comes." Judas and the Sanhedrin soldiers enter stage. The soldiers are armed with spears, swords, clubs, and chains. They pause near the sleeping disciples in the first grove. Philip and the other disciples are startled awake, and they stand confused at the turn of events. Philip asks, "Judas? What is going on here?" Judas glances at Philip and then moves to Jesus and he kisses him. "Greetings, Rabbi," he says. Jesus replies, "Judas, do what you came for quickly." The Sanhedrin soldiers step forward. They take turns bowing and mocking Jesus, and then they rush Jesus to arrest him. Peter suddenly intercepts one of the Sanhedrin soldiers. He grabs the man's hand, holding a sword, and drives his knee up into the man's arm. The soldier drops his sword. Peter pushes the man away from him, scoops up the fallen sword, and attacks a second soldier, swinging the sword across the side of the man's head. The wounded soldier cries out in pain as his ear falls off. Jesus shouts, "Peter, put away your sword. I do not want you to die as well. Do you not think that if I wanted, I could have called upon my Father, and he would have sent at once more than 12 legions of angels to rescue me? But how then would the scriptures have been fulfilled, which say that all of this must happen in this way?" Angered by the wounding of one of their soldiers. The rest of the Sanhedrin soldiers begin to beat Jesus and chain him up. Several of the soldiers start to go after Jesus' disciples. Confused and afraid, Peter and John flee. The other disciples run as well. Philip is the last to leave. One of the soldiers grabs him and wrestles him to the ground. He starts to bind up Philip's hands behind his back. Joseph of Arimathea arrives on the scene, and with a shout, he clubs the soldier on the back with his staff and throws the Sanhedrin soldier off of Philip. "Cease this madness," shouts Joseph. "I am a Jewish senator, and I am commanding you, cease this madness at once." The Sanhedrin soldier, unsure of what he should do, steps away from Philip, who gathers himself off of the ground. Joseph turns to Philip. "Go! Leave now while you still can." Philip glances at the Sanhedrin soldier, then at Joseph. He then quickly runs. Joseph moves to where the rest of the Sanhedrin soldiers are beating Jesus. Joseph grabs one of the soldiers and shoves him away from Jesus. "Stop!" he shouts. "Don't you know what you are doing? You are taking away a good man." Another Sanhedrin soldier knocks Joseph away while the rest drag Jesus to his feet. The soldier sneers and answers Joseph, laughing wickedly. "If this man is so good, Senator, then why is he going to stand trial for his life? I'm sure he's good and guilty." Right, men? The other soldiers laugh as they take Jesus away in chains. Joseph watches the Sanhedrin soldiers take his great nephew away. He then moves to the front of the grove of trees, places his hands over his head, and cries out in prayer to God. "Oh God, Hosanna! Hosanna! Help your people! Help your son! Deliver us, O Lord, in our time of need. Help me, God. Help me." Joseph rises and rushes off to find the Sanhedrin council. Following the Sanhedrin soldiers, he leaves the Garden of Gethsemane. This is where we will leave off here today. When we gather together again to continue to share in the legend of Joseph of Arimathea, we will find Jesus and Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus at Caiaphas' house early the next morning, where Jesus' trials will begin.